Hey everybody, it's Greg LaBeouf, and hey listen, welcome to Awaken the Protector Within, and I want to share a concept with you today called seeing the elephant. So the big question was this: what do good people do when a society's laws and institutions fail to keep them safe from aggression and violence? How do you get through a growing number of angry, hateful, aggressive people and still remain physically, mentally, and emotionally strong and positive? That was the question, and this podcast will give you the answer. My name is Greg LaBeouf, and welcome to Awaken the Protector Within. Okay, so let's jump into this. Seeing the elephant. Have you ever heard a story about these 5 blind men? They were born blind, and they'd never seen an elephant before. So what each of them was allowed to do was experience or touch one part of the elephant. So one was touching the back leg, one was touching the side body, another maybe the tusk, one the trunk. And of course, at the end of their experience, they were asked to describe the elephant. Now you get how you're going to have different descriptions. One has described the elephant as like a brick wall, mass, solid, and thick. And of course, he was experiencing the side of the elephant. Another is experiencing it as long and smooth and hard and pointy on one end and wider at the other. And of course, he's feeling the tusk. And then you're going to get a different description for the trunk and the tail and the leg and so on and so forth. What I want to share with you is that each one was 100% correct. But they were not seeing the totality. They had not seen the elephant. Now, this term has been applied a lot in military or law enforcement, and it's used when it comes to aggression and violence. Because they'd say that for an individual that had never experienced aggression and violence or combat, they hadn't seen the elephant yet. And so as you were growing up or as you were brought through basic training or boot camp, and you were just exposed to certain elements of it, those experiences you have begin to formulate your perception or your reality, and therefore your expectation of what aggression and violence is going to be, what it means, what it is. Now, why I want to share this with you is because everybody, I know you guys understand that there is no universal reality. We all are experiencing this world in very different ways. So for example, if we just took something like temperature, right now I think it's about close to 0 degrees outside Celsius. If I was to ask you whether or not it's warm outside or cold outside is going to be based solely on your perception, your reality, which is based off your experiences that you've had in the past. You see, if you grew up in a tropical climate where you're used to, the high 20s Celsius or the high 90s Fahrenheit, and that's normal for you, you're probably going to say that it is cold outside today. But if you grew up in parts of the world that sub-temperatures were a normal part of most of the year, you're going to be like, oh, spring or summer's coming. It's beautiful outside. And you both would be right. Now, in between our own realities, there is, of course, fact. And the fact is that it's 0 outside. We can measure the temperature. We can say it's 0 outside, but we cannot attach to that a reality of it's hot or it's cold. That is an individual perception. So why this is so important to share with you is that when it comes to studying anything really, but let's keep it focused on aggression and violence, we want to become the master of our realm. You want to become the master of your domain. So what sets people free is when we begin to help them discover what aggression and violence is and see it for all of its parts, not just maybe the limited part that they've been exposed to, but to see it for all of its parts. If you want to know what an elephant is, you want to understand and be able to explore and experience all aspects of that. There's power with that. See, I'll share a couple maybe more tangible ways that this affects people. You have individuals that when they're younger, they experience bullying when they're younger in school. And for many people, our perception or reality of bullying is that that's when you are expected to experience it. When you're in school, when you're in elementary school or junior high school, maybe even high school, you say, well, yeah, that's, bullying is a part of growing up. That has now become a kind of like an accepted, almost universal reality. But what happens to an individual that say, you know what, I never really experienced bullying growing up. You have people that, I had people that of course maybe didn't like me and I didn't really like them, but I never really got bullied. It was like I had my friends and, people I didn't like, I didn't hang out with them, but nobody really bullied me. Then all of a sudden, they're in their late 20s or early 30s, and they're in their professional jobs, and all of a sudden, they have a manager or a boss or a coworker who bullies them. Do you see where all of a sudden, your limited perception of bullying or violence and aggression. So it happens as, people get bullied, but your belief or your perception is that happens when you're a kid. And all of a sudden it's happening to you as an adult. And all of a sudden it's like your experience of what an elephant is. As a kid, you got to touch just the back leg, so you described it like a thick, round tree. And all of a sudden now you're getting the tusk, and that's a completely different experience. Well, it's shocking. You're unprepared for it. It's unnerving. It's destabilizing. And of course, then the trauma can be amplified. The effects of having an experience that is outside of your expectation or your reality or your perception has the potential to cause you far more damage and trauma. Does that make sense? I know it does. You see, and that's why we say, like, you want to be the master of your realm, the master of your domain. If you're going to study aggression and violence, then we want to study it and understand it. And within that, your perceptions get opened up. I think the other way that I could share this is, I remember growing up, my best friend growing up, Jay, it's like, we were inseparable. We're like brothers. And even to this day, he lives in the States and I live in Canada. We don't see each other a whole lot, but every 4, 5, 6 years can go by. And when we see each other, it's like, there's just this bond. Okay. But I remember as we were kids growing up, we're so close. We know each other that well. But I remember as we got into our early 20s, his self-image and who he was and how he behaved and all that type of stuff was set as mine was being set. And I had my experience with violence and that changed me. He went traveling. He became a big traveler, traveled the world. Just everywhere, living, working, interacting with people and stuff. But I remember even after a year, I think maybe it was closer to 2 years, but it was a year and a half to 2 years when he first went traveling and we hadn't seen each other, that the second we got back together, the friendship was still there, the respect was still there, but he was so different as a person in such a great way. But what had changed? It was the fact that he got exposed to other perceptions. He got exposed to other people's trials and tribulations and victories and beliefs and cultures. And it made him a better person for it. And my experience ultimately made me a better person for it because it forces us out of our own personal little reality and it helps us to expand. It gives us a different empathy for the world. It gives a different understanding. But I guarantee you today, he handles adversity and trauma and pain and suffering in his life. He handles it better because he has because he has these experiences that expanded and changed his perceptions and his reality and forced him outside of what he just otherwise would have grown up with, a more singular reality. It expanded his reality of the world. Hi, babe. So, when it comes to violence and aggression, it's a massive part of it. And this is what we want to do with this podcast, right? We want to share with people and help people to expand their perceptions and to see aggression and violence from so many different angles and different stories that people share and different experiences than what maybe you are experiencing. And the hopes of that is that you understand that A, what you're going through is normal. B, you're not alone with it. There's many different ways. There's many different facets to it. But at the end of the day, it's like a wheel and it has spokes on it. But those spokes, there's so many different spokes in the wheel, but those spokes lead back to kind of a hub of humanity. There's a humanness to how we experience aggression and violence. Even though there are so many different spokes, it's infinite. How many ways that we're each going to experience aggression and violence because of our own perceptions. We can never experience it the same as somebody else. But no matter how unique the experience is to us, it leads back to this hub. And when you start to see the elephant, when you start to see something for its totality, there's such a healing quality and there's such a freedom in that. There's such I don't know how to say it. It is so much power in expanding our reality and our perceptions beyond what they currently are. And I think that's one of the great things. I think that's one of the reasons why, and I've heard this said before many times from many different people, but that as human beings, we don't need to get to our final destination. When we suffer from something like aggression, trauma, we're suffering, or when there's challenges and adversity in our lives, yeah, we want to get past that. And at some point we will. But it's so long as we're progressing, so long as we're feeling progress, so long as each day we're feeling like we're moving forward, we're progressing, we're getting traction in our lives, that's what we need to be fulfilled. And the thing I've seen with aggression, violence is when people are at their worst, when people are suffering at the most, it's because the trauma has locked or fixated our perception. And we begin to get stuck in our story. But the second that you start to break the perception, the second you start to give and apply contrast, and the second you start to open up your perception and shift your reality, you start to free yourself from the story that you're stuck in. Yes, it happened to you, but you start freeing yourself from the story that you're stuck in and you start standing on the story. Your story and your experiences are there. You're not going to change them, but you can stand on them to reach new heights. And for me, that comes from experiencing the ability or having the ability to see something for what it is, not worse than it is. Sometimes it's bad enough alone, but to see it for what it is, to see the elephant. So I hope that you're experiencing that. I hope as we go through these podcasts, you will join us, follow us, subscribe with this, and join us on this journey and expand and shift our realities as it comes to aggression and violence, and thereby know for fact we will change the effects of aggression and violence on the world and how it affects us and those around us. So, all right, everybody, that was some thoughts for today. I'm going to get back to work, and that's it, everybody. Until next time, as always, please stay safe, stay ready. Want to awaken your protector within? If so, then head to awakentheprotectorwithin.ca and get your free Off the X training today.